So we're going to be talking about alchemy, and we're going to hear a series of names and places and functions and ideas and concepts that are riddled with misinterpretations and confusion. So I'm going to try my best to navigate us through these through this conversation, so to speak, and an attempt to describe alchemy from its historical background. So remember, this is the history of alchemy. So it's not a course in alchemy. So put away your beakers and your cups and your chalices and everything else, because it's not going to be alchemy 101 class. It's going to be the history of alchemy. But in that process, we will discuss certain ideas. And I think the best way to begin is to break down the actual word for alchemy and go through there. The word alchemy stems from an Arabic word, alchemia, right? Sometimes referred to as the philosopher's stone. But it's interesting because the word actually goes back to a Greek word, and that word is mea. And that word is derived from the Greek name for Egypt, Chemia, which is based on the Egyptian name for Egypt, King, meaning black earth. So the origins of the name, alchemy, goes back to Egypt. That's fascinating. And you see the name connected to the black earth because, in a sense, it is the alchemy of the black earth with the water that, of course, germinates the plants and creates life. Isn't that fascinating? So we'll go into that in a little bit. We take a look at old Webster's dictionary. We don't pay as much attention to Webster anymore, but I do want to get some basic definitions to work with. And it said it is a medieval chemical science and speculative philosophy. Right there and then, I'm going to correct it. It is not necessarily just a medieval chemical science. So, sorry, Webster, you're wrong. It goes back to the ancient period of time, and we're going to spend much of our conversation in the ancient world. How does that sound? And going into Panopolis and a few others when it comes to this idea of a. So, anyway, continuing. It is a medieval chemical science and speculative philosophy aiming to achieve the transmutation. You love that word, transmutation. I'm going to give you a challenge this week. So I want you to use transmutation like one time every day and try to fit it into a sentence. That's your challenge. So maybe you'll go through some transmutation as a result of that, right? It's a transmutation of base metals into gold. Okay, well, it's not just gold, but Webster says into gold. Well, yeah, silver and gold, right? Somebody asked the question just now, every day. Yeah, try to use it, drop it in casual conversation. You're at the car wash, the laundromat, at home, and see what happens. Okay, my sense of humor, it's got to stop. Maybe I should balance my humors through a certain kind of transmutation. Okay, all right, I got to stop. So it is a transmutation of base metals into gold. It continues the discovery of a universal cure for disease. So you can understand the first one, base metals into silver and gold. You can understand why alchemy would be very popular from that perspective. I mean, hello, you have this worthless metal, and you do some kind of process with it, it becomes silver and gold. I mean, how great is that? So there is a financial, an economic incentive there, right? And we'll go into that a little bit. The next, of course, is universal cure for disease. So the idea that it's healing, it's a medicine, and you'll see that. Finally, and the discovery of a means of indefinitely prolonging life. It's a means to give you immortality. I mean, what more would you want, right? Alchemy. I mean, you get you get the financial economic rewards, right? You get health, hence you get to have a longer life, perhaps eternal life. You can see where alchemy can really entice people, right? Just by doing some kind of formula, mixing certain elements together, and you can see what else, right? Goes from there. So, as I mentioned, the alchemy, a lot of the ideas go back to ancient Egypt. Alchemy is very much tied to the fertility of the Nile River basin. Uh, and of course, this fertility is this black soil, as I mentioned, being referred to as Kim. Uh, and then, at least by the fourth century BCE, there seems to be a well organized practice of alchemy in place. I do have to say that it most likely goes back earlier, and it's connected to the idea of mummification. Remember, when a person is mummified, the intention is that this body is to be preserved as a home for the spirit, right? You know, you have the ka, the ba, right? Are you following? So there's this idea of preserving the body and making it eternal through a mixture of, well, guess what? Chemicals. There was a chemical process involved, natron and others, in order to attain immortality. Mummification is all about immortality. And as I said before, chemicals were involved. So you could see how this would be a natural outgrowth of this kind of funerary culture, right? Thoth in Egypt, Thoth, Thoth, excuse me, was the originator of alchemy in Egypt, accordingly. And of course, what happens is that the Greeks will connect Thoth with their god by the name of Hermes. And together, when the Greek culture arrives, the Hellenistic age in Egypt, you're going to have Hermes Thoth or Thoth Hermes connected to alchemy. And as a result, it'll be Hermes Trismegistus. So these will come together, right? And you can see that Hermes, he has the caduceus, right? He has the serpent staff, which will become the primary symbol for alchemy. And eventually, as we know, medicine. Okay, so let's get into the Greek and the Roman alchemy, shall we not? As I said before, it is all about the search for immortality. You know, the Greeks and the Romans, they're living longer, like, and it doesn't mean they have a really long life, but long enough for them to go, you know, I kind of want to keep on living. I just keep, I want the story not to end. I don't want the chapter to close. You know, oftentimes in cultures where there's like a lot of suffering, a very short lifespan, there's just not enough time to contemplate living forever. And in many cases, life is so bad, you wouldn't want to live forever. You just kind of want to die like a dog. You know, I want it over. You're Mesopotamia, right? And you don't want to continue. But when you get to the time of the Egyptians and then of course the Greeks and Romans, there's more of a desire to live life. There's enough pleasures in life that they reflect that the afterlife may be special, but they don't want to leave it right away for that life. They want to stay here for a while. And so they start to conjure up ideas of a mystical place, where they can find immortality, you know, maybe a potion of some kind, or you can do a magical act, or maybe you can use alchemy. And there are stories of these figures that live very long lives as humans. And it turns out that Hermes Trismegistus, in some contexts, is viewed as a human. And accordingly, he drank the white drops, the liquid gold, and thus became immortal. So you have the beginning of the idea that if you take something that is metallic and you imbibe it, you have it, that it will enable you to have everlasting life. Okay, well, of course, Hermes Trismegistus, many of the stories have him as a man, right? He knew Moses and Pythagoras, various versions. Um, and because he lived for so long, he gained a very deep wisdom of the mysteries of the universe, mysteries unimaginable, beyond our comprehension. And yet, he lived long enough to comprehend these things and started to write them down, according to the story. And this became known as the Hermetica, writings of Hermes Trismegistus. It is often said, and I can see this, that he is the one who came up with the idea of the philosopher's stone. Now, according to the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, we'll talk about this soon, he declares that which is below corresponds to that which is above, and that which is above corresponds to that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of the one thing. And so now, as above, so below. And so there's a connection between these realms, right? A connection so that whatever happens on one of these levels of existence, of reality, whatever it be, something that's psychological or physical, whatever it may be, happens on all the other levels, that there is these connections, there's this harmony that works. In fact, Hermeticism teaches that you have the microcosm that is within oneself, while the macrocosm is the universe. And so the microcosm of ourselves relates to the macrocosm and vice versa, one and connects to the other. So the unity of all these things. Now you can see the larger ramifications of this. If all things are united, that means that we connect to everything from, humans to plants to animals to elements, and yes, to metals. And so if these elements change and we coordinate it properly, then we too change. We too transform. We go through a metamorphosis. Okay, now when it comes to the writings, the Hermetic writings, I do have to kind of overview this a little bit. There are three major disciplines. The first is always astrology. The second is theurgy, and the first is astrology. There's a secret here. There's a wisdom that I'm sharing that maybe you don't know. I'm kidding. Okay, this is astrology. The second is theurgy, and the third is alchemy. First, of course, astrology. We all know about this topic. That's a topic that I've discussed before. I've done a talk here. Ipso facto on that is the knowledge of the operation of the stars and the planets. It's the knowledge of how this universe works. And so basically through the movement of these heavenly bodies, that there are deeper symbolic meanings behind these movements that can be interpreted. That to interpret these movements is to understand the realm of the gods or God, right? However, it's important to know because this will connect to other ideas we'll talk about later on that while these movements connect to fate, and fate connects to the realm of the material. The realm of the material connects to the realm of the body, right? When it comes to our spirit within this body, within this material substance, right? Um, it does not dictate that. And so we have a choice. So astrology, in a sense, gives us the trends, the possibilities, the predominant influences from which we can be freed. How are we to be freed? Well, we'll get there. But of course, the realization, the knowledge, the gnosis, we are strangers in the strange land, that we are spirits enmeshed in the material realm, is important because once knowing that, we are now ready to reconcile with that fact and to do various acts to release us from the world. So the next one, it's called Thurgy. It's an interesting word, Theurgy, Thurgy. What is Thurgy? It is the discipline of learning the operation of the gods, learning the operation of the gods, and then to create an alliance with these gods, with these daemons, not demons in the wicked evil spirit sense, the daemons, the agathos daemon, right, the good spirits, also known as archangels and then angels, and so that through one's actions they recognize and support one's intentions. Recognize and support one's intentions. You got that? So you are, in a sense, telling the gods, the the good spirits, the angels, what to do. You are asking them, requesting from them, making an alliance with them so that you can work together for whatever you seek. And in some cases, you seek to be released from the mortal coil, so to speak. This is interesting, right? So, Thurgy is that. It's very positive. Uh, so it's not magic in a sense where I mean, it could be magic. It depends on your perspective. That's a whole other talk on the variances or degrees of magic, because you know, sometimes there's a real fine line between asking and telling, right? Requesting and demanding, so shades of gray, right? So that's what Thurgy is. And of course, you'll use Thurgy in relation to alchemy. You can see that, right? Before you do your alchemical processes, you're going to ask of the gods, of the good spirits, of the archangels, of the angels to work together for this transformation of not just these metals, but the sympathy between you and these metals, so that you in turn, like the allegory, so to speak, you in turn also change and transform. You understand? You guys getting this, huh? It's good, huh? Okay. So now of course, I'm always going to get this question, so I want to answer it real quick. Well, what about if you ask demons? Like Solomon asking demons. I mean, demons, like evil demons. Okay, well, that's not called thirty. So that's called Goetia. Goetia, which of course is where you make an alliance with these darker spirits, these demons, black magic, so to speak. Giovanni Pico, the Meridola, right, talks about this. But you see this also through many ancient works, ancient magic, right? But no, but we're talking about the positive side of things, right? And of course, the key of Thurgi ultimately is to become united with our higher counterparts, and thus, of course, transcend into our divine consciousness. And so you can see right away, hey, this sounds like alchemy too. Yeah. So astrology, in a sense, leads us to be free from fate, realize that our spirit self can be released, right? And then, of course, Thurgi is the process of asking for, to help out. And then, of course, now the direct process, right? The direct process is now alchemy, right? The third, right? They would call it the operations of the sun, so to speak. Hence, alchemy is not just turning lead into silver and silver into gold, right? It is the investigation through these material means of what is life, what is material existence, and of course, what happens to connect to the mysteries of birth and of death and of resurrection. Right? So they will connect this process that we go through in alchemy with chemical distillation, right? With fermentation, right? And so this is part of the mysteries. It's a process. It's the great work. Now, there I have a favorite author. I'm not sure. Somebody has asked me before, what are some of your favorite books? I have quite a few. I love Arth Fowden's work on Hermeticism, and it's called the Egyptian Hermes. I highly recommend it. If you walk away from this talk and you want to order a book, this is the book you want to order. So uh, I love the book so much. I have two versions of it, actually, two of them. I lent it out to somebody and then they disappeared. So I bought another one. Then the person magically appeared and gave me back. And so now I have two. And I'm holding on to both. So don't hold on to material things. Stop. Don't do it. Okay. So he says a very important paragraph here from his work, and I want to read it. I want to read it slowly because if you get this, you get everything I'm talking about today. Okay, so you understand this, grasp this, you are definitely on your way. So he says as follows. I'm going to go slow and explain things. He says alchemy was the art by which base metals were supposed to be transmuted into silver and gold. But while the alchemists' practical techniques were rooted in the skills of the jeweler, in the skills of the glassmaker, and such like, his theoretical pretensions touched ultimately on the human soul and its relationship to God. So while it does connect, as I said before, to the transformation of silver to gold and so forth, that it is connected to skills of jewelers and glassmakers and metallurgists, right? It does connect. There's a technical aspect to it, right? Still, it has theoretical pretensions touching ultimately on the human soul and its relationship to God. Interest in it is an interest in imitating the appearance and color of precious metals evolved gradually into a habit of thinking of metals as composed of a lifeless physical base or body. So that these metals, in and of themselves, right, are have a lifeless body, right? And number two, an invigorating principle or soul which imparted character and distinctiveness to the physical base. So then everything in these metals, there are two parts. There is the material base, which is lifeless, and then there is this soul, the spirit in them, right? Which has a life of its own. Okay, you guys getting that? So within all these metals and within all things, so to speak, too. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. The physical base was the same for all metals, okay? The physical base, but the soul was present in varying degrees of purity. Hence, the different characteristics of each metal and the belief it was possible to transmute base metals into gold by manipulating the soul. So, if you change the soul within the metals through various processes, right? If you change it, because the body is all the same. If you change the distinctiveness between these different metals, is the spirit that's within it. But if you can change the spirit within it, these metals can become something else. So this base metal, you know, let's just say it's a base metal that is of brass, right? So what you do is you heat it up, do kinds of things, other kinds of processes, in order to interact with its soul, with its spirit. If you change that soul and spirit, it will then change its kind into silver. And if you keep doing it, it'll change the surrounding metal that it's connected to into gold and so forth, right? Got it? Got it? But the same distinction between the body and soul of metals stimulated in some alchemists another, more analogical line of thought, which use alchemical imagery in order to describe the purification of the human soul and its ascent to the divine source. So, so there's a connection now between, in a sense, the lifeless base metal and our lifeless body, and a connection between its the metal's vital spirit, which gives it a special character, whether it be brass or silver or gold, and a connection to our spirit. And if you can hook these up together and harmonize them, one becomes a metaphor for the other and a story in and of itself. So that a physical process then becomes a generative symbol of a spiritual experience, of a metamorphosis. The alchemists themselves were philosophers, and the aim of their philosophy or divine art was the dissolution of the body and the separation of the soul from the body. Isn't that great? Is that right? It's making sense. You getting it? All right. So this is alchemy. You know, we've got spirit. Yes, we do. We've got spirit, and now I'm going to change you through transmutation. Okay. Yeah, I'm using the sentence. You know, are you behind? Okay. Okay. So there you have it. So you're going to have, of course, different ideas in connection, different variances of how we understand these terms. But uh, yeah, there you have it. Okay, so I will say that that the works of Hermes Trismegistus, the Hermetica, there is not a gigantic, well orchestrated discussion of the workings of cosmic sympathy. It isn't. It's not fully elaborate yet. It will be, but it does kind of connect Aristotelian observational science and with popular magical lore. It kind of brings them together. And you're going to see that these writings will have catalogs of various organisms and substances and of how they connect to each other, you know, and which is used for healing. Now, there is a work that is known as the Cyrandes, Cyranides, Cyrandes. And in this work, uh, goes into these sympathies, these occult properties of stones, of plants, of birds, kind of connects all these things together. And it really is a composite of different ideas and different authors, too. One of the authors happens to be a certain Harpocration of Alexandria. Harpocration. He lived in the second century CE. In fact, he talks about the fact that he saw this inscription in Syrian characters, written in Syriac, right? And it was translated to him. And the inscription refers to the soul, and of course, obviously, alchemy. In fact, it goes as follows. It says, "This is what he read on this inscription in connection to this work." But it goes, "O immortal soul, clothed in a mortal body, you are born from on high by the evil bonds of necessity. For God himself declared that you would rule over mortal bodies and bear with the sinful, being the yarn spun by the fates and necessity. For like a man who is impaired and in bondage, so the harsh bonds of necessity too hold you. But when you escape from the mortal and oppressive body, you will truly behold God ruling in the air and in the clouds, he who eternally brings upon the earth thunder and earthquakes, lightning and thunderbolts," which sounds redundant, right? "And moves the foundation of the earth and the wave of the sea. Such will be the eternal works of God, the mother of all things. Hmm. God has made known to mortals all things and their opposites." So here we go. So here you see this the theme of the soul being enslaved by fate, its liberation and return to the Creator. How do you do this? Alchemy, according to the word. Alchemy enables this to happen, right? So there you, so there it is. In fact, you have to have a knowledge of alchemy for the ability for the return of the soul. You have to study the natural sympathies, right? And you have to also understand what connects, but also that which is opposite of the other. And so it becomes it's a technical hermetica, right? Very philosophical. This work is very important. Right? It goes in there. But also, we have some other alchemical materials that we're going to go into. For example, you have the Neoplatonic philosopher. He's also an astrologer by the name of Olympiodorus the Younger. He lived from 495 to 570 CE. In fact, he's the last scholar who was a pagan of Platonism. And he thrived in Alexandria. And he talks, of course, he actually quotes portions of the serenities that no longer exist and making connections between various animals and the universe, so to speak. For example, he says again, Hermes, speaking, riddling of the egg, said that it properly had the substance of gold solder and the moon. So the egg is connected to gold solder and and of course connected to the moon. For the egg challenges the golden-haired cosmos. The cockerel or the rooster, Hermes says, was once a man cursed by the sun. This he says in the book called The Ancient. In it, he makes mention of the mole. So now we have a connection with the mole, saying that it too was once a man. It was cursed by God for revealing the secret of the sun, and the sun made it blind. If it happens to be observed by the sun, the earth does not receive it till evening. He says the sun made it blind, as it knew as well what was the shape of the sun. he exiled it into the black earth as a lawbreaker and divulger of its secret to the human race. Poor mole. So I guess the mole deserved it, right? You're going, what does this have to do with it? It has a lot because it's the idea of making connections between the sun and animals. There'll be connections between also the sun and various elements, especially, of course, the sun and materials, right? So there you have it. Okay, now there are other more here in the pseudo-demogratian, the Physia Mystica, right? We find an attack on those. Now, this is a little controversial. So, you guys want something kind of controversial? It has now begun. Maybe I'll get some drink of water here. People want to attain everlasting life so badly. So, why not use an alchemical process to bring you into everlasting life? There's got to be a shortcut, right? All right, here we go. So in the Pseudo-Democratium, in the Physia et Mystica, those who want to do a shortcut to immortality are criticized. It's an attack on those, quote, those who, on an unconsidered and irrational impulse, want to prepare a remedy for the soul and a release from all suffering, and do not think of the harm that they will come to. What does that mean? All right, so various chemicals could release you to the realm of the everlasting, right? There's a Persian sage by the name of Ostanis. He died. What did he use? He used a special alchemical process to release himself from the body, certain chemicals, which of course are poison. Okay? So by using poison to purify the soul, one can enter into the eternal life. Plotinus also mentioned the fact that students were doing this, and it was looked at as, well, yeah, this is how you don't have to go through all this, asceticism and focus and meditation. We use alchemy. What are you using? Poison. It's like, what? And you'll eventually get there. Well, yeah, but I don't think that's good. So you can see there's some problems there. Okay. Now we have another work called the Dialogue of the Philosophers of Cleopatra. This is not to be related to Cleopatra of Egypt. This is related to another Cleopatra known as the alchemist. It's interesting because there are four ancient famous female alchemists. There are many women that are involved professionally in alchemy. Again, this is the untold story. And it is told, of course, that she was involved with the Philosopher's Stone. Cleopatra was known for her what's called the Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra. It's a single sheet of papyrus and gives the secrets to gold making. In fact, we look at the image and we see the very first image on the papyrus is a serpent eating its own tail, which is often seen as the symbol of the eternal return. It's called the Ouroboros, right? Ouroboros, right? The serpent eating its tail. That's connected to alchemy on this particular document. This, in fact, of course, some people have said that the snake curving around with its head in its mouth, in a sense, it's eating itself, is connected to the beginning and the end, the eternal unity of all things, at which ends also begins. On this particular document, which is connected to changing things into gold, it declares one is the serpent, which has its poison according to two compositions, and one is all, and through it is all, and by it it is all, and if you have not all is nothing. Then you see also on this particular image an inscription. There's a ring that symbolizes gold, silver, and mercury. along with drawings of a dibicus. Dibicus is Dibikos. And these are drawings of, and of course, a kerotakis. These are used for alchemy, various processes. There is also a symbol of an eight-handed star that's connected to turning lead into silver. But one of the most important of alchemical uh, the basis is, of course, is obviously mercury. We'll go there right now. Excuse me, gotta use some alchemy of water to quench the throat of the soul, right? Mercury is the basic metal of alchemy. In fact, it's sometimes called quicksilver, and it's heavy. It's silver colored, right? It's a D block element. It's the only metal that is perpetually liquid under most conditions, right? It is a very poor conductor of heat. It's a good conductor for electricity. You can see that. And its freezing point is 38.83 Celsius. Its point is 356.73 Celsius. And so it is both the lowest of any metal when it comes to that. It's interesting. Uh, so they start to believe that what you do is that you vary the quality of the mercury by how much sulfur you put into it. And they believe that the sulfur can produce various metals. The purest, of course, was gold. Mercury was called for in attempts at transmutation of the base or impure metals into gold, which was then achieved. So it is used for these kinds of processes, right? Okay, so now you're going to ask me the question, Dr. Reedfield, can you really turn, you know, metal into gold? And the answer is, well, yeah. What? Yeah, sure. You got nuclear reactors, particle accelerators, right? You know, isotopes of gold can be synthesized from what? Platinum, right? And mercury by neutron bombardment, right? That you know what? The cost is synthesizing this gold really far outweighs its usefulness. But can you do it? I guess the real question is, could you do it then? And the answer is, I don't think so. Or maybe so. Hey, I don't know. Maybe it's possible, right? You just got to believe. I got to believe. All right. Oh, let's keep talking about Cleopatra. Again, not to be confused with the famous Cleopatra of Egypt. She is known to have invented what's called the Almbic, Alembic. This is an early chemical tool. Basically, it is, in short, the alembic has two vessels, one, two, and it's connected by a tube used for distilling chemicals. Right. So, in fact, the complete process goes as follows. The first part is called the cucurbit. That's the pot that contains the liquids to be distilled. So that's the first part, and it's heated by a flame. Okay, and then on top of it, there is what is called the head, the anbeak, and sometimes it's kind of cool. It has like a head of raw or a god shaped kind of cap. Anyway, this cap sits over the mouth of the cucurbit, and what this does is it receives the vapors going up. And then connected to that head is a kind of downward sloping tube leading to the receiver container. Okay, so in many cases, the cap and the cucurbit are made into one piece. So, but again, heated from beneath, and so there you have it. In fact, you may have seen this before. You know, in fact, you guys ever seen the pot still that is used producing distilled beverages. See, so if you brew your own beer and stuff, you're doing alchemy. That's good news. Okay, I'm stopping my sense of humor. Let's just keep going. So, with that said, Zosmus believes the alembic was invented by Mary the Jewess. Mary the Jewish? So, some people think Cleopatra invented this, the alchemist, and other people think Mary the Jewish invented this. Are you guys kind of figuring out right now? It's like, wait, there's a lot of women involved in alchemy. Yes. It's like this again, there's a lot of women involved in everything in ancient times. It's just one of those topics that are not talked about a lot. Okay, so who's Mary the Jewish? Well, Mary the Jewess is Jewish, right? We have, and she's connected to another invention. She is known connected to what's called leucosis, or the whitening of the metals, and xanthosis, or the yellowing of these metals. And using acid salt and other agents, other kinds of acids to help this process. In fact, it's very possible that Mary the Jewish is the one who invented hydrochloric acid. Pretty cool, huh? Right? And of course, she wrote works on recipes of making gold. We have various references to her in ancient times. In some cases, she said that sometimes alchemy is the union of opposites, joining the male and the female, and you will find what is sought. Okay, one becomes two, two becomes three, and out of the third, the one has a fourth. So she has this idea of this male, female, masculine, feminine alchemy that's coming together to create a sense of transmutation. Uh, Also, of course, Mary is created also to creating what's called the keratosis. The keratosis, you do want to hear this. The keratosis is a device that is used to heat substances, use alchemy, and to collect vapors. It is an airtight container and it has a sheet of copper on its upper side, but it has to be sealed in order to create this vacuum. And since it's using these hermetic techniques, that means when it is sealed, it is hermetically sealed. That's where it comes from. Hermetically sealed jars and so forth. Okay, I'm having fun here. Okay. So so anyway, so she is the one who came up with this. It's again another prominent woman of alchemy, inventing these ideas, right? The Keratosis is connected to the replication process in connection to the formation of gold, which is said to had occurred in the bowels of the earth using various pressure. So why not reproduce it here? Okay, so there you have it. And of course, you have Isis that's involved with alchemy. Isis and alchemy. Let's go there for a moment. You didn't know that there's this much in the ancient world connection with alchemy, did you? You know, this is going to be talking about the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and here I am talking about all this. There's so much here to be explored. Well, there's a work called the Hermetical Dialogue of Isis, the prophetess, to her son Horus. And it's connected to Zosimus, a Panopolis. And it's interesting because now Isis is connected to this idea of alchemy. And so it goes as follows. I do want to read this because it is interesting. And it goes into this idea, the added idea of not just alchemy, but moving into the realm of the of theurgy and a little bit of astrology here. So here we go. So accordingly, Isis the prophetess to her son Horus. He says, "You decided, my son, to set out and go to battle with the infidel Typhon for the throne of your father. Myself, I went to Hermopolis, city of the sacred arts of Egypt. I stayed there some time. In the course of events and the necessary revolution of the spheres, and after a certain passing of the Keroi, one of the angels who resides in the first firmament saw me from above and wanted to unite with me. So you have this angel that wants to unite with Isis, right? He advanced, intending to arrive at his goal, but I refused to yield, wanting to learn from him the preparation of gold and silver. When I questioned him, he told me that he was not permitted to explain this regard in view of the high importance of these mysteries, but that the following day, a greater angel, the angel Amnael, would come and would be able to provide me with the answer to the question. He told me that Amnael would carry a sign on his head and would display a small vase that was not covered with pitch, rather full of transparent water. He would be able to reveal the truth. The next day, before the sun was nearing its course, the angel Amnael appeared, greater than the first, taken by the same desire. With my regard, he descended towards me. He did not stay immobile, but hastened to where I held myself, and I did not stop asking him the question. And when he delayed to answer, I did not yield a bit. But I resisted his desire until he let me see the sign which he had on his head and transmitted to me without reserve and with sincerity the mysteries that I sought. Here we go. At last he showed me the sign and began the revelation of the mysteries. Offering oaths, he expressed himself in this way: I adjure you to heaven, earth, light, and darkness. I adjure you by fire, water, air, and earth. I adjure you by the height of the heavens, by the depths of the earth, and of Tartarus. I adjure you by Hermes, by Anubis, by the roaring of Cerberus, by the serpent who guards the temple. I adjure you by the ferry and by the boatmen of Archaron. I adjure you by the three fates, by the Furies, and by the sword. And after these oaths, he demanded that I communicate nothing to anyone whatsoever except for my beloved and legitimate son, so that you might be able to be he and he you. So now there's a connection, you know. Uh, so then, observe in passing, ask a certain laborer, the farmer, Archerontus, and learn from him what is sown and what is harvested, and you will learn from him that the man who sows wheat also harvests wheat, and the man who sows barley also harvests barley. Learn to comprehend the whole fabrication, demorogia, and generation of all things, and know that it is the condition of man to engender a man, of a lion to engender a lion, of a dog to engender a spirit. One must stay with the existing nature and the matter one has a hand to prepare things. And so gold will harvest gold, like produce likes. And it goes into the fact, a little deeper, that yes, there is a connection between all things, but there are certain categories of spirit that just still hold together, that have to be specified and focused upon. And the metals form, in a sense, this phylum, this group that has their own spirit that is still a bit distinct from that which is a plant or that which is animal. Is that making sense? In fact, the work goes on that there are many types of souls and they are differentiated, but they are all intelligent. And yes, they do connect to one another. These souls do connect to one another, but in order to do any great works, you have to realize and understand these categories. Ooh, got it? Now, okay. Well, let's go back, if we will, to the emerald uh, uh, tablet of Hermes, which of course was supposedly originally in Phoenician and discovered by Alexander the Great. Although many people say it was really an Arabic work between the 6th and 8th centuries. And the emerald tablet is important because it talks about the idea of the unity of matter, even though there are categories, as we just read. there are still a unity, and that unity is still ether. It is still spirit. This particular work was quoted by Roger Bacon, Albertus Magnus, John Dee, Aleister Crowley. You may recognize these names. But the idea is that the unity of matter and the basic truth that all forms is a manifestation of one root, the one thing, and that which is ether. Okay, so we'll talk more about it. I want to make sure that you follow this. I want to talk about something else a little bit. I want to talk about my favorite, Zosimus of Panopolis. Zosimus of Panopolis, he goes there. He wrote, of course, many works. The Divine Art of Making Gold and Silver is one of them. He is a historical figure. And Zosimus, what he does, he defines the study of the composition of waters, movement, growth, embodying and disembodying, drawing the spirits from bodies, embodying the spirits within bodies in connection to alchemical processes. For him, the eternal process or processes of metallic transmutation is possible, but it is, transformation of lead into copper, into silver, into gold. It is possible, but it is always a mirror of an inner process of purification and redemption. Again, the external process of the changing of these metals are reflective of the inner process of human purification and redemption. We're going to get to one of my favorite parts of the talk in a few moments. I have a few, but this is one of them. And that is, and it gets strange. You guys ready for strange? Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Okay. So he was a man who really connected. I love this guy. He's great. I mean, he's a Platonist like myself. He's a Gnostic like myself. Uh, he's into Judaism, incorporates certain ideas in Judaism within his beliefs. He is into Zoroastrianism. So he brings it all together. And he reflected that the soul might be freed from the world of flux and illusion. Possible. In fact, he said that this happens every time we fall asleep and we are given rise to dreams and visions. And he writes down his dreams. This was an amazing source of information and studied a lot by a philosopher by the name of Carl Jung, right? I'm going to give you his dreams here. One of his most famous dreams concerned that of a bowl-shaped altar. And of course, bowl-shaped altar is in relation to the alchemy of transformation. And so the story goes, Osmond says that he fell asleep and he saw 7 steps leading up to a bowl-shaped altar where a priest was standing there upon the top. Okay, so in some cases, in other versions, it's not 7 but 15 steps. But anyway, so he goes up, and this priest that's standing there by this bowl-shaped altar says to him, "I have accomplished the descent of these 7 or 15 steps of darkness and the ascent of these steps of light, assumingly 7. And he who sacrifices is himself the sacrificial victim, casting away the coarseness of the body and consecrated priest by necessity. I am made perfect as a spirit." A lot of people will say that the 7 steps represent the 7 planetary luminous ones, in astrology. So it connects. So you have the descent into the underworld and the ascent. Now he continues, the priest says, "I am Aeon, the priest of the sanctuaries, and I have submitted myself to the undurable torment." What? That story gets dark pretty quick. Undurable torment? Hey, Dr. Reed, I was loving this story until you got to what? Undurable torment? He said, "For there came one in haste in the early morning who overpowered me and pierced me through with the sword and dismembered me in accordance to the rule of harmony. And he drew off the skin of my head with the sword he was holding and mingled the bones with the pieces of the flesh and caused them to be burned with fire that he held in his hand till I perceived by the transformation of the body that I have become a spirit." Yikes! Well, that's not fun. And that is my endurable torment. In fact, Aeon cries horribly and then melts into the opposite of himself, into this mutilated figure. Later on, you mean he's going to have another dream? Yeah, later on, Zosimus saw the same priest. I think Zosimus has to watch what he has before he goes to bed. Oh no. Okay. In the guise, he sees this priest again in the guise of a man of copper. So now he's no longer flesh, he's of copper. And he's still presiding over the altar bowl, which was filled with bubbling water. And in that water, he saw many people, and he describes them as burnt but living. In fact, one of these burnt and but living souls in this bowl uh, cries out and says as follows: "The sight that you see is the entrance and the exit and the transformation. Those who seek to obtain the art enter here and become spirits by escaping from the body." Okay, great. Then a bystander who just happened to be next to Zosimus explains that it is the place where is carried out that which is called embalming. I see the Egyptian connection, right? "For these men who wish to obtain spiritual perfection come hither and become spirits, fleeing the body." And then, of course, Zosimus is sitting there going, "Well, therefore I said to him, are you a spirit?" And he answered and said, "A spirit and a guardian of spirits." As for the priest, Zosimus explains that the man of copper you will not find as a man of copper, for he has changed the color of his nature and became a man of silver. If you wish, after a little time, you will see that he has become a man of gold. Is this interesting? So you're having the transmutation. Are we talking about that? So through this mixing bowl, you have the transformation, the alchemical transformation that's connected to the metals of our spirit, of our soul. Of course, Zosimus tried to ascend to this, what's called the place of punishment. He kept losing his way. He encountered a priest and a white haired man known as the Agathos Daemon, the good spirit. And Zosimus tried to mount the steps again, those 7 steps, and then and then, being led by his guide. And then, of course, his guide gets hurled into the cauldron. Finally, the last dream, it reveals a dismembering of another figure. We don't know exactly who it is, but it concludes with a voice telling Zosimus, quote, "The work is complete." And so there you have it. So this is all about alchemy. Zosimus then viewed this alchemical cauldron, this vessel, as the baptismal font. And so, with the tincturing of vapors of mercury and of silver, mercury and sulfur, excuse me, and of course, he connects it to the purifying waters of baptism. And so, in a sense, you're being initiated into the mysteries, the Gnostic mysteries. And this mixing bowl is called the kata in Greek, and it symbolizes, of course, the divine mind. Well, it's pretty heavy stuff. Yeah. So, and of course, again, these ideas connect to universal sympathy, and so we ourselves will go through this transformation alchemical transformation if we seek to enter the spiritual realm. Okay, well, um, he Zosimus, he does write quite often to this another alchemist by the name of Theosebia, who said that she has to watch out for demons that could distract from this process of alchemy, right? He says, do not roam about searching for God. He says, but sit calmly at home, and God, who is everywhere and not confined in the smallest places like demons, will come to you. And you're thinking, what is he talking about? You'll see. So he's instructing her to stay calm and to meditate. I'm giving you a strategy. And being calm in body, calm also your passions, desires, and pleasures, and anger, and grief, and the 12 portions of death. In this way, taking control of yourself, you will summon the divine to come to you. And truly it will come, that which is everywhere and nowhere. And without being told, offer sacrifices to demons, but not offerings, nor the sacrifices that nourish and entice them, but rather the sacrifices that repel and destroy them, those of which the membress spoke to Solomon, the king of Jerusalem, and especially those that Solomon himself had wrote as the product of his own wisdom. So doing, you will obtain the true and natural tinctures that are appropriate to certain times. Perform these things until your soul is perfected. When you realize that you have been perfected and you have found the natural tinctures, spit on the matter and hasten toward Horamidas and receive the baptism in the mixing bowl. Hasten up towards your own race. And then, of course, he goes through alchemical procedures. so, so once again, alchemy is training ground, the metaphor, the allegory even of what we do in the afterlife as we transform ourselves, right? So he wrote another work to her on Apris and furnaces, Theosebia, and he also he talked about the fact that about fate, discussed fate, and I think this is interesting. He talks about fate again to her. He confronts a spiritual problem. He said that people are always following fate, and they need to be free of it. But that people are mindless marchers. That humans are walking in this procession that goes from life to life to life in the material realm, but it's truly not life at all. It is the gradual death of the soul as it becomes more and more part of the material substance. And this fate weighs us down. And he says, no, we must release ourselves and not be of those people who are, he quotes, swept along in the procession of fate. And then he brings up once again the mixing bowl, where Hermes speaks of these souls who have not yet been baptized in the intellect as like irrational animals and how they need to do this. That we are a blind wanderer at the mercy of demons. But he says that no, we must we must arrive at the mixing bowl. We possess this ability if we only awake. So so Zosimus makes it very clear that hey, while our body is connected to faith, our spirits are not, and we can be freed through the alchemical processes, right? And so this is the idea. The fate controls only the body and not our soul. Oh, yeah. Okay. We find in a Syriac fragment an interesting bit written to Theosebia. Another, I know, they're writing a lot, right? This is critical of her. What happened is Theosebia. Oh, this will really throw you off. She kept her alchemical knowledge a secret, and she founded small circles that were apart, as he says, from the multitude. where they're swearing of oaths by their members. And he says, no, we shouldn't do that. We should absolutely not do that. In fact, he exhorts Theosopia not to be like Aristotle, I'm not crazy about, right? Who, and who kept, quiet and shared only with students. People, he wanted alchemy to be shared by everybody, right? He agreed with her that he called her his sister, that it is about spiritual purification and contemplation. He agreed with that, but he says it shouldn't just be for inner circles. Alchemy should be for everybody. Sounds like an evangelist of alchemy. He said we should teach everybody alchemy, these processes, because we need to save everybody. I thought that's interesting. He also delves into areas, some of these fragments that seem to connect to the Book of Enoch and the Enochian knowledge. So he goes there a little bit too. One fragment that's saved by George Sincilius from the 9th century. One says, it is stated in the Holy Scriptures or books, dear lady, that there exists a race of daemons who have commerce with women. Hermes made mention of them in his Physica. In fact, almost the entire work openly and secretly alludes to them. It is related in the ancient and divine scriptures that certain angels lusted for women and descended from the heavens. They taught them all sorts of arts of nature. On account of this, says the scripture, they offended God and now live outside of heaven because they taught to men all the evil arts which are of no advantage to the soul. Now, I think that's interesting that this is being quoted because it seems to me that when you look at Zosimus Panopoulos, it appears that he doesn't think this. He thinks that these are gifts not by these evil angels that have fallen or these just fallen angels. He believes that they are gifts, as you just heard, right, from on high, right? And so he would probably disagree with the Book of Enoch when it talks about Azel's teaching men to make swords and knives and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working with them and all kinds of costly stones and coloring of tinctures and so forth. He thinks that this is a good thing. So I think this was a misquote, but it is fascinating that he does seem to have a knowledge of Judaism. All right. Enough of Zosimus and Panopoulos. We're going to kind of go a little bit faster here, but I want to make sure that we get a few other ideas. In the 6th century, we got Morenus, a hermit of Rome. He left the city to set off to find a sage by the name of Adfar. And here he learned alchemy. After the death of his patron, Morenus came in touch with King Khalid. And of course, a treatise resulted in this. It is said to be translated from the Arabic by Robertus Castranus in 1182. Morenus is described as a recluse living in the mountains. Khalid inquired about his philosophy and so wanted to know about the secrets of alchemy. And so Morenus does talk about alchemy and how Almighty God in his power created powerless servants who neither undo what he has done nor advance what he holds back, nor can they even know anything except what he grants them. So you have this idea of these servants of this universe that is operational, but that is neutral in a sense. We're going somewhere with this, right? And also about the fact that that the central root of the operation of alchemy is the elements of the earth. It is earth, air, fire, and water that will become essentially one. And that, of course, the human body is the microcosm of the macrocosm, with the 4 elements within the human body itself. So one is connected to each other. So we have more of an articulation of these ideas of the body related to the universe around us. Of course, he thought that the true root are water and fire, and the others elements to go from there. and that also he talked about the idea, once again, which we heard earlier, that still there are categories of alchemy, categories of spirit, like producing like, that man is produced by a sperm, just as of a single grain of 100 are brought forth, from which a great tree grows. Thus too was woman made of one man, but then of both are born many children, each of a different color and appearance. And consider the tailor sewing his cloth, of which he has made a swift or some other garment, using only the cloth. And of course, goes on, it makes connections to the idea that the cloth is still made out of thread, but can be spun into different kinds of formations, from that which is simple into that which is complex. And then, of course, he talks about the tinctures and the changing of colors of the metals. I won't spend forever. I actually have about 5 pages just on that. And this talk is 48 pages, and I'm on page 18. So we'll never get there. But I just want to make sure that you understand that. There we go. Okay, we move on into, of course, still into Islamic lore. You got a Geber, who thrived around 750 CE. He was known as the Wise One, and he made the Arabic version of the Emerald Tablets. Geber, by the way, uh, was very skillful in the mysteries. In fact, and he spoke in a mysterious style. In fact, he wrote in a mysterious style. And since his name was Geber, and his style was so mysterious, they called it gibberish or gibberish. And that's where that came from. You're learning so much here. Okay, and so you're going to have also Geber transform alchemy into a scientific methodology with so he saw it as a science. It's not just magical, it's not just spiritual, it can be indeed science. Of course, you do have alchemy in ancient Chinese beliefs amongst the Taoist monks, a certain Chang Tao Ling, who's as people call it, a Taoist pope, who lived in 35 CE during the reign of Kung Hu Ti, right? And talks about him and how he used alchemy to create what's called the elixir of life. But what's interesting is that when alchemy emerged in China, the word for gold, kim or kim, was not yet created in the Chinese lexicon. And so eventually the transmutation of other elements into gold was an aim, but it was never the main focus. So Chinese alchemy, that's why I'm going to keep this kind of Chinese conversation apart. It's a whole other aspect. It's not about the transformation of metals per se. It's always about something else that's more important. So we kind of move along here. Also, in India, the same thing. Again, this focus is mostly into Western civilization, because that would be a whole another topic. Although I'll be remiss to mention that you do have some aspects of Western perspectives within India when it comes to alchemy. The goal alchemy in India uh, included the creation of a divine body and immortality, which was still embodied. And you do have the manipulation of mercury and sulfur that is often used. What is fascinating for me, here we go. Okay, I'm going to get off on another rabbit trail. You do have the yakshis, right? These goddesses, and you have those who are connected to the 64 yoginis. 64. And the 64 were correlated to the currents or winds of the human etheric body, and they're connected to basically a 64-fold matrices residing within the body and connected to all things through alchemy. So we have 64 parts. And so what will happen is the number 64 is important. And if you get all of this in balance, joy will be the result, and it will be perfected. You're going to have this in the 64 in the yogini tantric symbols, right? chakra, the 64 spokes of the wheel, right? By the way, the yogini, which of course are yakshis, they're also known as sorceresses or demonesses. And it is believed that they are gifted with supernatural powers, and even initiated female sexual partners in Tantra, right? And it's interesting is that there will be places where they would worship these alchemical yogini in India. Usually it was an open roofed circular temple, and they used to be all over India. This is before the Bhakti movement became very popular. And so practitioners would go in there. But what's interesting is that in order to enact the alchemical process, there had to be a cutting up and the transmutation of bodies. But of course, they didn't want to actually kill people. So what they did is they politely asked from their neighbors for a corpse, maybe of a poor family, so they could practice what's called the beheading ceremony, and then maybe other kinds of cuttings up. And then they'll promise to return the body, but it had to uh, have the sacrifice of the body through the beheading in order to indicate the transformation process. And you're thinking to yourself, doesn't that sound like the cauldron that we just talked about earlier? It sure does. The burning away of the body. I know, or this in the sense, the beheading of the body, the destruction of the body. It's a fascinating topic. A lot of people will say this goes back to an earlier practice of human sacrifice, but hey, we're not going to go there. And of course, then we get into medieval Spain, and of course the various practices there. And we're going to have the secret book of Artephius, which talks about the preparation of the secret fire, which is basically the preparation of the mercury, right? And of course, and we talked about a lot of these ideas already. So it's kind of cool that we kind of covered it. The work states, though, it appears then to Spain that this composition is not a, actually, yeah, we'll keep going. This is a long quote. So anyway, then I want to get somewhere real quick as we're going to go skip here and here. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Oh, so good. I know. This is a piece for the eyes of all these interesting things, but I want to make sure that we're getting into the 1200s, and hermetic processes were very popular during that period of time. The problem is that alchemy was in the realm between being accepted and being heretical, and so a lot of these practitioners during the 1200s and 1300s found themselves um, uh, under the Inquisition, and that was problematic. There's a certain Peter the Apona of Padua, who lived in the 1200s, and he acquired a lot of knowledge, but he was accused by the Inquisition of possessing 7 spirits, each enclosed in a crystal vessel, who taught him the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And of course, he supposedly he had caused the creation of money through his alchemical processes. So he is turning a metal into gold and gaining revenue from it. So there you have it. Of course, you have Albertus Magnus and his ideas. I'm just kind of sweeping through these because, again, I'm looking at our time. You have Raymond Lully, and of course, he put out 486 treatises, and he was born in Majorca in 1235. And he, again, he was, what's interesting about him, I want to go here for a split second. It's interesting about him. It's a very strange character. He was, he had these Christian visions, and he believed that he could use alchemy in order to bring together the 3 religions. He said that he used Hermetic teachings to bring together ideas of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And he believed that through the alchemy of understanding the understanding them all agreeing and understanding alchemy, the basic premises. That from there they would come to an agreement, which as a result there would be a built sense of universalism, and that there'll be a transformation, and the all will become one. So so anyway, and then of course the story goes that his reputation reached John Kramer, the abbot of Westminster, and he sought out Lully in Italy and persuaded him to come to England, introduced him to King Edward II. And so Lully says, "Hey, I'll support you." And so the king said, "Okay, can you make metals into gold?" And he said, "I will do so in order to support your Crusader cause." And so the guy Lully ended up in the Tower of London, turning supposedly a metal into gold, 50,000 pounds worth, according to the story. But then Edward became greedy. And as you can expect, Lully discovered that he was not just a guest in the Tower of London, he was a prisoner because he wanted him to keep supposedly making this metal into gold. And as a result, he was snuck out, and that was ended that. You have also, of course, ideas connected to the Philosopher's Stone, Zosimus of Annapolis, as I mentioned, from the third into the early part of the fourth century. This Gnostic mystic uh, believed it was possible to transform lead into copper and then into silver and gold. And he seems to allude to this philosopher stone. And of course, Geber, as we talked about, also seems to talk about it. And then, of course, by the 11th century, academic skepticism rises up, and you have Avicenna or Ibn Sina, who seems to go into it, and Albertus Magnus to his pupil Aquinas. And the idea is that the philosopher's stone goes all the way back to the beginning of humanity, back to Adam, with God who revealed knowledge of the stone. As a result, the stone was in possession of righteous people through the holy line of Seth, going to Abraham and the patriarchs and even to King Solomon himself, and was connected to the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem. In fact, it is referred to supposedly in Psalm 118 as the cornerstone, that, the rejected cornerstone. That was the philosopher's stone. Elias Ashmole in the 1600s believed that, also asserts that the root goes back to Adam. And so we're going to find the stone within Grail romances like Parsifal, right? So connected to the Templars. You have Menzinger Wolfram von Eichenbuch, who composed the Parsifal between 1197, to 1209. He was a poor knight who lived in the court of Thuringia and who spent a considerable time at the court of Landgraf Hermann at the famous Wartburg Castle near Erfurt. In his story, the Grail is the sacred stone bestowing longevity, a stone of the purest kind called lapis exilius. It sounds like lapis exilius. It sounds like this is Harry Potter. Sorry, there was never a human so ill if he one day sees the stone that he cannot die within the week that follows. And though he should see the stone for 200 years, his appearances will never change, save that perhaps his hair might turn gray. It sounds like the Indiana Jones stories, where that knight, well, I guess he got a little old, but the idea is, as long as you stay around the stone, you'll keep on living. Now, the word lapis exilius has two possible translations. It can mean stone from heaven or stone from exile. This reference, of course, is connected to both ancient and medieval sources as referring to the meteorite. Wolfram asserts that the Grail stone was an emerald that fell from Lucifer's crown during the war in heaven. Certain angels who did not take sides in this war between the angels and who remained true to God, and those who sided with Satan, took the emerald stone and brought it to earth, and who has the stone? Of course, it is the Templars. So there's a lot when it comes to the Philosopher's Stone. Of course, we kind of keep on moving along, and we know that Roger Bacon was very much into the alchemy, but he's seeking now the elixir for life. He wants to live forever. And so there you have it. So he did leave some works on alchemy. We do have, of course, Arnold Villanova, who was trained at the Sorbonne in Paris, was also known as a theologian. He, of course, he was connected to, of course, he was tried for the Inquisition. And we know that he was connected to also the idea of using alchemy in order to extend life. We also have Paracelsus, 1493 to 1541, kind of a difficult man. He's a habitual drinker, outbursts of abusive language, right? And it's funny because he believed, this is kind of important, he believed that those who practice an art, basically he said that the best way to know an art is to practice it. The patients are your textbook. The sickbed is your study. And so he angered his colleagues by lecturing in German instead of Latin. And he stressed also the use of alchemy, but here we go, something new, I'm trying to get somewhere. He focused on the tripartite alternative to explain the nature of medicine. He said that mercury and sulfur and saltpeter, I'll be finishing up pretty soon because I'm going to give you one more story after this. Mercury, sulfur, and saltpeter, that they contain poisons that contributed to all diseases. The fire was the work of sulfur. Because he burned a piece of wood, he said fire was the work of sulfur, smoke was mercury, and the residual ash was salt. Paracelsus believed, here we go, that mercury, sulfur, and salt provided a good explanation of the nature of medicine because each of these properties existed in many physical forms, but he also theorized that in order to be cured of these poisons, we take these poisons in moderation, in littles, so that we can fight the larger aspects of the poisons. So you take a little bit of the mercury, a little bit of the sulfur, a little bit of the salt, which we all take a lot of. We should be ready to go. We're all salted with our high salt foods. Anyway, take a little bit about that, and a little of it about this poison helps cure us. And of course, it goes into the microcosm of man and the macrocosm of nature. Okay, so where I want to go, there's quite a bit here, is that I want to finish up here. I want to find it here. And that is, here it is. So here's my last story for today, although we covered quite a bit. Alessandro Cogliastro, 1743 to 1795. He's a controversial Italian magician and alchemist. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and share with you, of course, Alphonse Levy also shares his formula. And that is, this is what you've been waiting for because you asked at the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. The recipe for eternal life. You talked me into it. I'm going to do it for you. You guys ready? Okay. So this is the recipe for eternal life using alchemy. So basically, the first thing that you do is you take a retreat for 40 days. I could see many of you take it off from work, 40 days. It's kind of like a jubilee. And of course, now what happens is that you can only do this every 50 years. So you basically, since we don't live too often, some of us do, to be 100 years old, it's kind of a once in a lifetime experience. If you don't get this right down the first time, you're going to have to wait another 50 years. Now, here's the time. Now, we've missed it because it's July. You have to do this ritual. You began this ritual on the full moon of May. Yep, so it has to be under the full moon of May in the company of one faithful person. So you bring one person with you. Now, it must be also, you have to have a fast before for 40 days. So you're not going to be eating 40 days before this. And you have to drink what's called maydew. This is, now, it's really complicated because it's collected from sprouting sprouting corn with a cloth of pure white linen. So basically, you got to find sprouting corn. And then you have to, I'm sure that kind of means wheat if it's in Europe, because obviously, corn wasn't that popular. It becomes popular in the world, but with a cloth of pure linen. So you get linen and you pick it up with it, and eating new and tender herbs. Okay. The repast should begin with a large glass of dew and end with a biscuit or crust of bread. There should be slight bleeding on the seventh day. I'm sorry, on the 17th day. 17th day, you should bleed a little bit. Well, then you take what's called the balm of Asaph. Now, what is a balm of Asaph? Mercury. Wait. Dr. Rita, you got to take mercury? Oh, yeah. I'm asking you, don't do this. Don't do this. Okay. So now you're going to take some mercury, and you're supposed to take this mercury every morning and every evening, beginning with a dose of 6 drops and increasing by 2 drops daily to the end of the 32nd day. At the dawn, which follows accordingly, you should have some slight bleeding. You think? A lot more than that. Then it says you go to your bed and remain in it until the end of the 40th day. And of course, after the first awakening, after the bleeding, take first grains of universal medicine. Yeah, more of the mercury, right? A swoon of 3 hours will be followed by convulsions, sweats, and much purging, necessitating, get this, a change of both bed and linen. So now you're having convulsions. Well, you're drinking mercury. Having some mercury troy, sorry. At this stage, a broth of lean beef must be taken. So, yeah, okay, good. And then take a second grain of universal medicine. No, don't do it. Which is, of course, it says astral mercury, but in this case, mixed with the sulfur of gold. So now you're taking mercury and you're drinking this with the sulfur of gold. On the next day, have a warm bath. On the 36th day, drink a glass of Egyptian wine. So you have to go find some Egyptian wine, right? And on the 37th, take the third and last grain of universal medicine. No, don't drink any mercury. I love this. This is great. All right, I have to read this slowly. A profound sleep will follow. You think? How about death? Okay. During which the hair, teeth, nails, and skin will be renewed. You mean they'll fall off? The prescription for the 38th day is another warm bath, steeping aromatic herbs in the water of the same kind as those specified for the broth. On the 39th day, drink 10 drops of elixir of Arsharat and 2 spoonfuls of red wine. The work will be finished on the 40th day, and the aged man will be renewed in youth. What? It's, of course, the bath of immortality. So there you go. So I just gave you the formula for everlasting life. I think it's probably the formula for death. Because if you're going to be drinking that much mercury, it's going to be over. Okay. So as you can understand, alchemy is a very complicated topic. And I covered, I think, very well ancient alchemical practices in detail. I think you understand how it operates, how they used it, how they understood it, and how it connected to them. Not only the idea of turning metals into gold. I mean, I could have told you more stories about that, especially popular during the Renaissance, where people were supposedly making all this pure gold and getting wealthy as a result. Although in one case, one guy got in trouble because the other guy wouldn't take this pure gold because it looked too pure. And so, unlike the regular coinage that was being used at the time, it became suspicious because it was too good and you couldn't use it as currency. Anyway, so for profitable reasons, the second reason, of course, you can see for medicine, alchemy in connection to medicine. And finally, of course, the idea in connection to the universal sympathy through its activities as a training ground, as well as a means of understanding uh, immortality, moving from this life of the realm of the physical and transforming through our inner spirit from the material realm into that which is eternal and to be free of the mortal coil. That's it. Thank you so much. There we go. So you guys are not going to try it, are you?
I already did.
Oh, crap. Sorry, Thomas. Nice knowing you.
An abbreviated version.
Okay.
I did it in the 1 hour version.
The 1 hour version. Yeah. The elixir shot. It's all mixed together, a little mercury, a little gold. Whew, yeah. Questions? Any questions?
Well, maybe not.
And I was thinking of you, Margie, when it comes to your work, because you do gold work.
Yes.
So, any of this stuff sound reminiscent to what you do?
Well, I know you don't mix gold and mercury. That's
Right?
Yeah. Don't. No, don't.
So
don't heat it up and breathe the fumes, which I know people have done in the past to make amalgam, and you can it turns the gold mushy, and you can smoosh it into places, and then you burn off the mercury. But that's a great way to die young.
Well, I mean, the second draught in this formula I gave you has the gold and the mercury together.
Yeah.
You get the mercury, gold and mercury, and then mercury again. So, I guess that would do you in the second one, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's like there will be a profound sleep. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
It would be really
Forever
profound.
sleep. Yeah. No, mercury's nasty stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found it interesting how important it was to the alchemist process. It made me think of, I know that there's the tomb of the first Chinese emperor. They're excavating it, I think, and they believe that there's like a river of mercury underneath that where he's buried. And lo and behold, what does the river represent in Chinese history? It stands for like eternal life, which is basically what we're talking about. And I think they found it underneath a pyramid in Mexico as well. So I guess everyone loves it back in the day.
You got that liquid aspect of it too.
Yeah. Well, it's a very cool metal.
Yeah.
It does things that no other metal will do. So I can understand why it got noticed. But to be ingesting it, wouldn't they have noticed that it kills you? One would think.
Well, I mean, you notice that people going into convulsions and bleeding.
Yeah.
But those are just stepping stones towards, you have to, and of course you saw that also when it came to the mixing bowl, when they're cutting, the whole, although that was more metaphysical, the idea, the mixing bowl. Of course, obviously, you have this concept of liquid, water, or yeah, or
but it sounds
or
like
mercury.
a very complicated way to commit suicide, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Um, is the everlasting life that there is, that like the release into the next life, maybe?
Well, yeah, and it could, I mean, I did read also a section that had to do with in Neoplatonism, you have these people who are criticizing certain philosophers who are basically taking poison to enter into, because they see not like us as poison, they see this as portals to entry into everlasting life.
Yeah, but did that kind of get muddled with this somehow? Because what they're recommending will kill you,
Yes, it will.
so it will not give you everlasting life. Somebody must have noticed when people
Yes.
started dying.
People live short lives, but not that short. In not noticing, when it comes to accumulation of knowledge, although there's a short life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wasn't it used in clock making, like the
Huh?
Mad Hatter? That's where they get that from, right?
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
definitely.
And that was in the 1800s. So if they didn't have it figured out in the 1800s, then 3,000 years ago, I guess they wouldn't have. Or,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't care how long ago you lived. When people start dying, when you do your treatment, you would think people would notice. They weren't stupid.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just
Didn't they
ancient.
didn't they used to give mercury to people to treat syphilis for a couple hundred years?
I think they did actually.
Yeah.
Maybe the idea was that it, like, if you could poison yourself but not kill yourself, that would make you stronger over time somehow.
That
Or
sounds
burn
like
out impurities, or
yeah, that sounds a lot like radiation therapy.
Yeah.
Small
Oh, there you
doses of something that will kill you uh, might actually cure you. Interesting.
yeah, that's a good point.
No, that's true, and that was operational during the Middle Ages. The idea of taking these kinds of things in moderation in order to be cured. Moderation of sulfur, moderation of you just take a little of it and
Like
they
iocane
cure you.
powder.
Huh?
Like iocane powder.
Yeah,
You develop
exactly.
an immunity to it. Right.
Yeah. So so you have that. You have that, and so you're gonna you have. So I think it is the idea that you take things in moderation, and you have this with illnesses. Maybe they got that idea. You have a little bit of the illness in order to become immune to it. And so this is going to go into certain ideas in connection to alchemy. Whatever so if it works with diseases. Maybe it work with the metal processes. I don't know. I mean, Paracelsus goes into that, right? Paracelsus, right? We talked about him, and so he goes into the idea that you take a little sulfur, mercury, and salt, which he considers all as poisons. You take it in moderation and it fights the greater diseases that are connected, or illnesses that are connected to all three of those. Although I think it's interesting, as I mentioned before, salt as a poison. I think that's fascinating. So, but whatever. Yeah. Any other questions, alchemical or otherwise?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how alchemy really is essentially an external exploration of the internal desire to, transfigure yourself and transpose yourself to the next level. And really, what it really was an exercise in the physicality of trying to move through that move to the next rise to the next level. That's fascinating. I never really thought about it from that angle before. That's really cool.
It's using the symbolism
Mm-hmm.
to help guide us to transformation. Yeah. So it is it's magical in that sense. You learn these symbols. You learn, how these things change, and you use that as a means to do it yourself. It prepares you for that process, not only now, but when you die in the afterlife. You go through, and so you have, Annapolis's vision of the cauldron and the priest, who transforms himself into these different metals because his inner self is changing, just like the alloys. You have every alloy, you have the dead material, or not lifeless material, I should say. You have the living spirit within it. That living spirit it can be transformed and move and evolve and bring bring yourself with it. So you have this concept of the the self that which is brass, or that which is silver, or that which is gold, and this priest will change, and finally, I guess it's understood that he will be free altogether. So may we. But the idea of suffering and being cut apart, the flesh being cut and mingled, it gets a little bit macabre. Now, for Carl Jung to go, what's going on here?
You go far enough back, it all gets macabre at some point or another.
Yeah.
In comparison to today's perspective.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, you want to add to that?
No, that's
good. Anybody else? Yeah. And was this an easy talk to do? No.
But see, you covered every possible thing that we wanted to know.
Did I hope? Hopefully I did. I'm hoping I did. So the other thing I want to bring up is that if you hadn't noticed, in the ancient period, a lot of women were involved in alchemy.
Yes, I thought that was very interesting.
You notice all those female names. I didn't mention at time, but the hydrometer, the form of it was connected to Hypatia of Alexandria, who in her writings to Snetheus also did alchemy. So Hypatia was also involved in alchemy. And she goes into instructions and letters to her friend Snetheus of how to put this thing together. So she was involved too. So it is important to know that it's not just a male only dominated conception when it comes to these arts. And I think that's also fascinating. Yeah, anybody else? Any other questions?
Dr. Rightful, I don't have a question. I just have a comment because I've been studying alchemy in the way of the spiritual sense, and that's all we do is we use these ancient principles and we combine it with quantum physics.
Oh, that's interesting.
And yeah, so I learned so much, and it gave me a deeper scope in what we do. But when you say transmute, I use that word every day. It's pretty easy when you're a modern alchemist.
So you'll fill your quota.
I filled my quota. By 8 a.m. I've already filled my quota. So thanks.
Yeah, for some of us, we'll have to really force the word every day. It's like, oh, I just feel like I need to go through a transmutation and go into the shower. It's like, no, that doesn't work. You can't force that word in there. Oh.
Well, it depends on your philosophy of what transmutation is.
That's true.
So if you're thinking about it in terms of you're going to become something completely different, that's a perceptual choice.
Yeah, cleansing.
Yeah.
You'll be different as a result of taking that shower, the cleansing process. Okay, I think it's alchemical. Okay, we're stopping now.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
You use shampoo. I mean, isn't that alchemy?
It sure is. The alchemy of the shampoo, the water, the soap added on there. There's a process going on, a chemical process, right? Things are clean. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So you can maybe view the shower as the baptismal alchemical pot.
It's definitely a gift from the gods.
It's a gift from the gods.
You don't want to live without it.
Yeah. If it's been a while since you've had one, boy, it is a blessing.
Well, actually, I did have a question. Do you think spirits, the idea of having spirits as alcohol, is the same as what they were referring to?
Okay, so I think that the idea of well, we'll go there. When it comes to the ancient, they believe that when you drink something of alcohol, there is something that controls you, that takes over, that you're possessed. And so in ancient times, you were possessed by which is another talk, by the way, that I could do, a spirit of Dionysus, that he has possessed you through the fruit of the vine. And so that intrinsically there is this spirit that is in there that will cause you not to cause you to go crazy, to lose control. So is it actual spirit? Oh yeah, people thought there was an actual spirit in it. Does that help? Especially the Dionysian, the Greco-Roman
Yeah, I didn't
context.
think about it that way. I was thinking about the alchemical process of it inhabiting a spirit in and of
Oh,
itself,
I see
of
that. Yeah,
what you were
because
talking about. Like everything has in alchemy, and
yeah,
that's what I rate to as a modern alchemist, that everything
mhm,
has an intention, even what you're making. So
yes.
everything has a form. That's where I was thinking about
Oh
it.
yeah, that too. I agree with that too. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, sorry with the other literals, but yeah. Speaking of alcohol, also the distilling process, right? Just thinking about the mechanisms used for alchemy
Yeah.
are used for distilling today. It's interesting. So it's a transformation, chemical transformation. But no, that's fascinating. Yeah. Again, we got spirit. Yes, we do. We got spirit. How about you? I, and what's interesting about it is that they had this animistic idea that there's a spirit in all things. But as I stressed before, in ancient world, they seem to be categorical. They said, yes, there are spirit in all things, but you have to do things according to certain categories. So all metals form one category, as I read. There's two other places where it talks about that. All humans, all certain plants form. So you still have to organize yourself. But then what I find is fascinating is you take those different, once you have that down as a group, as it goes, like the metals, as it goes through its transformation. Once you understand that, then the next level is for you as a spirit to connect to that process. If that makes any sense. So there's kind of like,
Yeah,
these are the
that makes
categories.
perfect sense to me. That's part of what we do in the kind of study that I do.
Yeah.
You
So
become the object of which you're transforming. That's the
yeah,
way I understand that concept. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You become, and you identify with that spirit within it.
correct.
Yeah, and that's what so you got to understand it first as a separate, and then you become it or
Exactly.
transform along with it.
Exactly.
And there is, I wanted to go there, but I didn't have time. There was there's alchemy also kind of inserted in certain other ancient stories, where you have, Isis or Demeter burning away the infant to make this infant into an immortal transformation. So that's
Okay.
another. A lot of people don't recognize that. It's like, oh yeah, that's interesting. It's the burning away of the and the transformation of the flesh that Isis is doing, and of course, in order to meet her, there's both stories. So you have that, which
Gotcha.
is, uh,
Yeah, gotcha. No, yeah, I'm thinking about that.
so you have that, and of course, the Phoenix story also appears in here. So they'll connect alchemy to the Phoenix,
Right.
so the ashes. So a continual aspect to that. So that's another little bit. So the Phoenix gives birth to others. Anyway, there's lots of rabbit trails I could follow.
Oh,
Many,
yeah.
many, many ways, many places. But I do highly recommend the the work of Garth Fountain, if you can get a hold of it, the Egyptian Hermes. It's worth reading, and I recommend that. And if you can get a hold of writings connected to Panopolis, Zosimus of Panopolis, his dreams, and even look at Jung's, look into it.
Okay.
What is going on going on with Zosimus? I mean, Zosimus doesn't seem to be like a household name, right? But when it comes to alchemy, it's like, yeah, you got to know this guy. And then I look at Webster going, it's a medieval and Renaissance. I'm thinking, what? How can they do that? It is, but it's before that. It's very ancient, and I think Zosimus doesn't get enough credit. And he wrote a lot, and there's a lot on him. So definitely worth investigating. He's not very systematic in the sense where he doesn't go so much into the universal sympathy. He does a little bit, but not as much as you get in an organizational sense later on. And I think that also begins with Islamic alchemy in many ways. They kind of tries to organize it, categorize it, put more of an Aristotelian edge to it, and then of course transfers it over to Spain, medieval Spain, and then from there it kind of crosses into this realm of it was science, and it becomes more of like pseudoscience in that case. But yeah, I think where am I going with this? Anyway, going everywhere, but it's fascinating. Yeah. Any other questions? No.
Yeah. When you mentioned the back to the whole spirits thing, it was making me think when you said the word fruit of the vine, it made me think of how important wine is to Christianity. So maybe, and there's a process to making it. You have to crush the grapes and let it sit and do all that stuff. So maybe consuming the wine, the physical feelings that you get when you get buzzed, for lack of a better term, brings you closer to God. Or when you get drunk, conversely, it's like what you said about Dionysus. Maybe it's God taking you over in a way, or the Holy Spirit, or what have you.
Yeah. If in fact, Thomas, let's go further on that one. The alchemists refer to the mixing bowl as the baptismal.
Okay.
So you do have that transformation of baptism.
Yeah.
And then of course you have, what about alchemy in connection to the transformation of water into wine?
Correct. Yes.
Or what about the transformation of the
Body of
bread
the
into a
bread.
body, or the wine into the blood? Isn't that transmutation?
And there's ritual behind it. You're doing physical things and you're saying certain incantations or prayers in order to make it happen. So there's a whole process.
And yes, and through the alchemical process of Jesus, right? People then become Christ-like through the same imitation aspect that you see in many cases with people moving into the using the change or transformation of these metals, right?
Yeah.
They're transforming along with it through an actual some kind of spiritual connection. Well, what about in Christianity when they're doing the same thing with the alchemical Jesus?
Yeah. But I guess also on a simpler basis, you could also say that wine was extremely important back in those days because it was kind of dangerous to drink water.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But.
Well, and the thing on wine, we didn't get Welch's grape juice until we got the 20s, 30s. Grape juice always ferments, immediately ferments. So grape, usually it's always wine. It's going to be fermenting immediately when you pick it off the vine. It's going to be fermenting pretty soon. Those people who know your grapes know it. You're not going to have grape juice for very long. So, and you don't have refrigerators. You don't have, So the wine is always, there's no, when people say, I hear these pastors talk about, people drinking grape juice. I think to myself, Christians drink grape juice. I'm going, that never happened, And then of course you have the idea. It's like, well, don't get drunk with wine. The same word is when Jesus turned. It's the same word that when Jesus turned water into wine, he is turning. It's the same word in Greek, and yet it's considered the best wine. And then Jesus is talking about, the wine and vats and the process of fermentation in one of his parables. And then you have, Paul saying, "Hey, Timothy, take a little wine for your stomach's sake." So it's alcohol. It's alcohol. Can't help it. It's drinking grape juice no, it's not going to help. Alcohol, yeah, it'll clear it up. I have this nurse friend who who, when she starts feeling down, the first thing she does is take a shot of something, a hard liquor. If it doesn't, in her stomach, just the first sign. Just take care of it. Sometimes that takes care of it half the time. Like, oh, okay. So alcohol has some power. But once
Well, they
again,
used to give beer to the Sumerians way back.
yeah,
You get like a quart of beer a day if you were one of the simple workers. It was
yeah,
probably just so to give you nourishment, but also to kind of give you those feelings that you don't really hate your life so much.
no, of
You're
course,
happy
yeah.
toiling.
They drink a lot of beer. Of course, I mean, you have those who made the pyramids drank beer. Beer
Yeah.
was a beer, and it was leeks, and it was onions, and it was garlic. And I'm thinking, honey, I'm back from working on the pyramid.
You're making me hungry now, Doctor.
Yeah, can you imagine the pyramid breath? Great combination. I'm sure they had it with flavor with other things though, like
I wouldn't have to like put that top stone on the pyramid all hung over though the next day.
no. Especially if it's crooked, it's like crap. Pharaoh's like, hey, something's wrong.
Yeah, that's the end of you.
Enemy. Yeah, that's right. Throw you down from the top of the pyramid. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, absolutely, Laurel. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to close it up. But thank you so much, and hope you guys enjoyed this. So, and I look forward to seeing you for the next talk, which is I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing again? Who knows?
Oh, the next one is
2 weeks.
Kibble.
Oh, that would be great. Okay.
The
Oh, transformation.
22nd. So
Huh?
join us on the 22nd.
Yeah. So I'll be doing Kibble, the great mother goddess of Phrygia, and who became popular throughout the Roman world, and whose priests, the Galli, transformed themselves from men to women. So, and we'll go into that. So that should be very intriguing. So, and probably interconnect with a modern discourse a little bit. Till then, have a great day.
And then
Thank
we'll
you.